I'm Tim Fitzpatrick, based in Fife in Scotland, and last year in 2019, with my friend and collaborator Jeff Erwin, I made a film in New Mexico. The film is called We Choose to Go to the Moon. The film actually started life as an art installation, a site-specific piece between myself and Jeff, and it was actually designed for a feature in the landscape in the desert of southern New Mexico. The desert feature that we were interested in is a 2-mile wide crater called Kilbourne Hole. And a very large part of the reason that we chose Kilbourne Hole was because exactly 50 years before the day that we were there with our art installation, it was chosen as a training ground for crew of the Apollo 12 mission. In order to make the art installation, which was also called We Choose to Go to the Moon, we relied on a group of visitors to the site who also became project volunteers. And they were bussed into the site on the day of the event. Little did they know they would go on to become characters in our movie. Through this wider collaboration and sharing of the project with the public, it kind of became a community art project, which is something I must admit I didn't expect it to become, but it's something that I do have quite a lot of experience in. As a record of the art piece, the art installation, and a record of the day, we decided well in advance that we wanted to film as much of the event as we could. But it was only when we looked back through the film footage that we began to realise that we had much more than just a record, or at least the chance was there to make something more than just a record. So in addition to the, I suppose, fairly straightforward documentary approach, the idea emerged of putting a narrator's voice in the story, or at least creating a story through a narrator's voice. And in the film, you'll see how we managed to place that in the timeline of our day at the crater and during the project. In order to do this, we did have to shoot some additional scenes later on in the year. And these have given us, I suppose, a kind of drama reenactment element to the project. But by and large, underneath all that, we still have this fairly accurate documentary of the art event at Kilbourne Hole. So I like to think that the upshot of the project is that we do have a kind of experimental piece. And I do think that the experimental nature of the project is really brought to the fore with the soundtrack that was created by Andrew Knight Hill, the composer, working with trumpeter Bede Williams. I was a little bit nervous or maybe unsure of the approach to begin with, but I love the outcome and the soundtrack that Andrew and Bede have created. And I find it amazing to think that the finished soundtrack is just a fusing together of trumpet sounds and the sounds of the Apollo mission and of the desert. The film was made during last year's Las Cruces Space Festival, that's 2019. Or at least it was begun during the Space Festival. Obviously it was commissioned by the Las Cruces Space Festival, and it should have been shown, or we would have liked to have shown it at this year's Space Festival, and obviously for fairly obvious reasons that couldn't happen. So apart from a small private test screening in St Andrews last year, this is our first full public screening of the event as a part of this live streaming event. And on behalf of all the team, the filmmaking team, I hope you really enjoy the film, and we look forward to taking any questions you might have at the end. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Andrew, and I was really grateful that Tim invited me to compose the music for this film. It was a really exciting opportunity for me to work again with the trumpet player Bede Williams. So Bede came to visit me down in Greenwich in London, and we made lots of different recordings all over the buildings. We did some in some studios where we got some very close, dry recordings, and some in some giant big stairwells that we have in the university buildings. And we put these together to really explore this scale of space and this sense of moving from small details and textures in the landscape to these enormous, massive craters to kind of represent this sense of scale and distance, which is obviously what we get when we are off traveling to the moon. So I tried to apply in the music lots of principles and effects that are also similar to those that are used in the spectroscopy that is the inspiration of the project. So you'll hear at times elements of the trumpet sound separated out into very pure notes, very much like when astronomers scan into the horizons and they get back information about different beams of light. So using these sense of scale and extracting these elements from the trumpet, I then use those to counterpoint against some of the radio transmissions. So we used lots of really incredible textures and grimy bleeps that came from the NASA transmissions, as well as actually lots of their communications and their voice. So when you listen, you'll hear a merging of the trumpet with the NASA recordings. And one of the things that I'm particularly proud of is I think that you lose a sense of where one begins and the other one ends. So I really hope that you enjoyed the film. It sounds really amazing on headphones. So if you have a pair of headphones, do pop those on. And I really hope that you enjoy the film, and I look forward to talking to you later. So without any further ado, here's the film.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We are now at T-minus 8 hours, 58 minutes and counting. We have resumed the count after our built-in hold. We resumed at 1:22 a.m. on schedule. As we pick up the count, we'll be preparing to clear the pad as preparations are made for loading cryogenics aboard the Apollo Saturn V launch vehicle. The cryogenics, liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, will be loaded beginning at about the T-minus 7 hour mark. We have a new weather forecast, just came in. The front, which began passing through here late yesterday and been here since that time, has slowed down somewhat and is not expected to now move through by launch time, as was earlier predicted. However, this is not going to be a constraint to launch as presently viewed. We'll be looking for winds 15 to 20 knots. This is at the 60-foot level. There will be a 50% chance.
The desert is a strange place. Either that, or it's just a very good place for strange things to happen. I thought that as a child when I saw two astronauts climb out of a crater. My name is Ramon Juan Vasquez, and now I'm a man of the desert, and the lands and the mountains hereabouts. And I have found my part in it. Ramon's road trips, Southwest expeditions, to take my old bus and a bunch of curious folks out across these lands and try to understand the place, how it is, the way it is. For me, it's to know all the tracks and turns, routes back and forth, and then there's the old stories. But to make sense of the whole thing, then it's other folks we need, for the detail, for the science, for the certainty. One time we might bring a geologist, or maybe even a natural historian, an ecologist, all sorts. And you know, if the desert is a good place for strange things, well, today it's a good day for the desert. Today I'm heading back to the crater.
We meet in an hour of change and challenge, In a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance, the greater our knowledge increases, the greater our ignorance unfolds. Despite the striking fact that most of the scientists that the world has ever known are alive and working today, despite the fact that this nation's own scientific manpower is doubling every 12 years in a rate of growth more than 3 times that of our population as a whole, despite that, the vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension. No man can fully grasp how far and how fast we have come.
You're listening to KTAL Radio, 101.5 FM in Las Cruces, and I'm Nan Rubin. And today's the day for a trip to the moon. If you haven't booked a ride already, we're talking about Ramon's bus trip out to Kilbourne Hole. 50 years ago today, astronauts Pete Conrad and Alan Bean of Apollo 12 headed out to the same crater. That was a training mission, the 9th of April, 1969. So Ramon is marking the anniversary with his own trip to the moon. But he's also taking geologist and sometime astronomer Dr. Anna Hollis. Anna will talk about Kilbourne Hole as well as the moon and the history of its exploration. But she'll also be there to help with an experiment into it. Ramon says it gives his moon trip a mission. And you know what? He's already blasted off. I'm Nan Rubin, and you're listening to Community Radio in Las Cruces, KTAL 101.5 FM.
Kennedy said, "We choose to go to the moon." That was 62. I was barely a child. But now, out here, it feels like that time again. So we choose to go to the moon today. And my bus, I say that's the rocket. Kind of for fun, but kind of real and honest too.
You're looking good. 1 minute to LOS. We'll see you on the other side.
Safely to Earth, re-entering the atmosphere at speeds of over 25,000 miles per hour, causing heat about half that of the temperature of the sun, almost as hot as it is here today, and do all this, and do it right, and do it first, before this decade is out, then we must be bold.
I got something on the horizon out there. I got the freighters too, but I don't know where I am yet.
And when you reach this place, the place you're headed for, the crater, the moon, the stars, wherever, well, you gotta have a mission. Why did you ever go there?
Test pilot for NASA. He takes a pen and puts it, hangs it in there, and then flies the airplane.
I'm Nan Rubin, and you're listening to Community Radio in Las Cruces, and we've seen a tweet that says Ramon and his crew have made it to their destination. I'm Nan Rubin, and you're listening to Community Radio in Las Cruces, KTAL 101.5.
I just want LPG to the right level. Roger. Low level 3. Coming down at 2, okay. Start the clock. Roger, copy contact. Ron. Looking good. Watch today. Looks good out there, Dave. Looks good.
All in one place. The other rock type that's here that's incredibly unique that we'll talk about a little more in a minute are mantle xenoliths. And this was something that the astronauts were trained to look for because they really wanted to learn about the lunar mantle. So they wanted to be able to identify these different kinds of rock types, learn how to...
And now I've been joined by our very own Dr. Science, Vince Goodchick. And Vince, you're going to tell us all about Anna's experiments in light. Take it away.
Thanks, Dan. Anna is looking at the hydrogen alpha line, which is light from the skies way beyond the moon. She'll be able to tell us more details. Basically, you look through a telescope and you need a spectroscope that splits that light into different colors. You can pick out the H alpha line.
So I understand that her mission is to show off this beautiful red line, which is called the H alpha line. You just mentioned it, and it's related to the element of hydrogen. Can you tell us a little bit more about what this is?
Well, hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, and we're seeing hydrogen through this telescope in some very tumultuous places, where it gets so hot that its electron gets bounced to very high energies. As the electron finds its way back down to more placid levels, it generates light. Any moving electrical charge does. But only very specific energy levels are allowed. Each shift in energy between these allowed levels gives a distinctive wavelength of light, a color. The H alpha line lets us see into the universe. It's also beautiful.
That sounds like it's something that's possible for us. Thanks a lot for explaining all of this. We're talking to Vince Goodchick. He's here in the studio with me, and this is Nan Rubin at KTAL Radio, Community Radio in Las Cruces.
Thanks, Nan. Good to be here.
Intrepid, Houston. Go ahead. Well done, Intrepid. You got a bunch of happy geologists in the back room waiting to go. Say, we're standing by with a LEM consumables update and also standing by for your description.
Years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there. Space is there, and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there. And new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked. Thank you.
I would tell it just the same as Anna, if I could, but she's a scientist and I drive the bus. But it turns out that light's all in code. I'm talking about elements, hydrogen, nitrogen, plutonium. It doesn't matter. It all works just the same. It's all in code. All the elements and all the stars and all of the universe. Well, you got every shade of color you could ever hope to see or imagine, even out here in the desert. But on the moon, for our experiment, for our mission, we choose one color, one exact, one precise, one perfect red, like a thin red line in space, a red line all the way to the edge of the universe. All of this is true. A thin red line in space, and every star in all the universe.
Okay, Dick, we're copying the moon now. How's it look? Oh, this is even a much better shot than the last one. Oh, do you see any place there you'd like to go? I'd like to go any place there. Okay, one road's in and somebody's pencil is close by. There you go. George, yep.
A red line in the desert? That's okay. Better than okay. It's a good place for strange things to happen. An extremely good place.
This is Apollo Control. That was Erwin giving us
The exploration of space will go ahead whether we join in it or not. Carol de la O, La Mesa, New Mexico.
We have felt the ground shake and the air shattered. Tracy Holton, Seattle, Washington.
An untried mission to an unknown celestial body. Tony Davis, Alto, New Mexico.
Whether it will become a force for good or ill depends on man. Alice Caruth, Las Cruces.
240,000 miles away from the control station in Houston. Sandra Padilla, Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Vast stretches of the unknown. Joyce Westerber from Alto, New Mexico.